The whisper comes first. Low, unsteady, carried on the breath of a villager too afraid to speak it aloud. At night, the house breathes. The words linger like frost on a window pane. The villagers do not repeat them often, but when they do, their eyes drift to the crooked lane at the edge of the forest. There, under a canopy of twisted branches, stands a house that no one claims. A husk of wood and stone older than memory. Its walls sag as if tired, its shutters hang loose like torn eyelids. Yet it does not fall. It waits. By day, it is silent. Only the crows circle, landing on its roof, tilting their heads at shadows inside. But at night, when the wind dies, when even the crickets grow still, the house begins to stir. Its walls swell outward, its beams groan as though under strain, and then a sound, a long drawn-out sigh rising from within. It is not the sound of settling timber. It is not the hollow echo of shifting air. It is breath. Villagers say if you stand too close, you can feel it against your skin. A damp exhale, warmer than the night, brushing the hairs of your arm. Some insist they smelled it too, a sour, earthy odor, as if something beneath the floorboards was rotting. Others swear they heard a rhythm. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Like lungs, they whisper that the house is alive. That it has been alive for longer than anyone dares to imagine. That it watches and waits and hungers, and if a house can breathe, what else can it do? The village sits at the edge of a dark forest, far from cities, far from roads that strangers use. It is a place where people know each other by name, where faces are familiar, and where whispers travel faster than the wind. Life here has always been quiet, shaped by the rhythm of crops, the weight of winters, and the heaviness of old traditions. But every quiet village has its shadow. For this one, it was the house. It stood on a crooked lane at the farthest corner of the settlement. Built in a time no one alive could clearly remember. Some said a wealthy trader once lived there, returning from distant lands with gold and stories. Others claimed it belonged to a family that disappeared suddenly, their belongings left behind, their table still set for supper. What remained certain was this. After they were gone, no one else stayed long. The first family that moved in did not last a season. Their youngest child fell ill, gasping for breath at night, as though invisible hands pressed down on her chest. She died before spring, and her parents left, refusing to speak of what they had seen. Another family tried years later. They said the house groaned like an animal in pain. Their nights were filled with drafts that circled the rooms even when windows were shut. They left with only what they could carry, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. Over decades, the stories grew darker. A widow who sought shelter there was found wandering the lane at dawn, barefoot, shivering, her lips blue. She could not explain why she had run out into the cold, only that she woke to the sound of breathing near her ear. She never entered the house again, and for the rest of her life, she avoided that side of the village. The elders say the land itself rejected the building. The soil around it was damp and sour, yielding no crops. Roots twisted out of the earth like bones, choking any tree that tried to grow. Even animals avoided it. Dogs barked at its door but would not cross the threshold. Cows turned restless when driven past the crooked lane, their heads tossing, their hooves stamping as if in panic. And yet the house endured. Its beams sagged, its roof rotted, but it did not fall. Every storm battered it. Every winter froze its bones. Still it stood, as though something within held it together. Not stone, not timber, but will. The villagers learned to live beside it. They walked faster when passing its lane. They told their children never to linger. At festivals, when stories were shared by firelight, someone always spoke of the house. The tales changed in detail, but the fear did not. Some claimed they saw its shutters open and close as though the house blinked. Others swore they heard whispers inside, soft and steady, as if someone spoke in their sleep. The oldest villagers carried heavier stories. They spoke of nights when the wind stopped, and the house could be heard pulling air into itself, as though it needed to feed. Those who listened too long sometimes dreamed of suffocation, waking with their chests heavy and their throats dry. It was said that one boy returned from such a dream unable to breathe at all, his lungs collapsing in silence. And so the house was abandoned. No one entered willingly. No one repaired it. But no one tore it down either. Some believed it could not be destroyed. Others feared what would be released if they tried. So it remained, a scar at the edge of the village, a reminder that some places are not meant to be claimed by man. The children grew up with the warning carved into them like scripture. Stay away from the crooked lane. Do not go near the house, but children are curious, and whispers have power, and so the legend did not fade. It settled into the bones of the village, into its very identity. Outsiders may not have known, but every villager lived with it in their shadow, the knowledge that somewhere close by, in the dark, stood a house that should not be, but was. And when the sun went down, when windows were shuttered and fires burned low, the question returned as steady as a heartbeat. If the house breathed, what else did it keep alive inside its walls? The villagers carried the story like a wound. They told themselves the house was just wood and stone, that it was their imagination shaping shadows into something alive. Yet the evidence never stayed quiet. On nights when the moon was sharp and silver, people swore they saw the curtains stir. The windows were broken, the glass long gone, but the fabric moved as if someone inside was pulling it back to watch. The villagers said it was the house itself that watched, not a person, not a thief. Then there were the sounds. It began with groaning beams, the kind that might be blamed on settling wood. But the rhythm unsettled them. A low, steady intake, a pause, a long sigh. Those who walked past the crooked lane alone at night said they felt it more than they heard it, like the air itself shifted with the rhythm of lungs. One farmer, returning late from his fields, froze as the sound washed over him. He dropped his tools and fled, telling his wife he felt the house's breath against his face, warm, damp, and unshakably human. Others claimed they saw the walls move. Not much, just enough to notice the wood swelling outward, as if something inside pressed against it. One traveler passing through the village said the structure looked wrong, as though it did not stand still but shifted slightly when one was not looking. His words unsettled the villagers, because they too had felt the same, but never admitted it aloud. For a long time, the house was feared but untouched. People whispered, but they did not dare approach, until the night the priest went inside. He was not from the village. He had come on assignment, sent to tend to the souls of the people. When he learned of the house, he called it superstition, a distraction from faith. He carried a cross, a flask of holy water, and a voice filled with certainty. One autumn evening, as the villagers gathered near the crooked lane, he declared he would step inside and prove there was nothing to fear. The crowd stayed outside, torches in hand, waiting. They watched him push the door open, its hinges screaming like something in pain. He crossed the threshold and disappeared into the dark. They waited minutes, then hours. When he finally returned, his face was as pale as ash. He would not speak. His hand shook so violently that the flask rattled against his belt. The villagers pressed him for answers, but he only whispered once, "It should not breathe." From that night on, he avoided the crooked lane. His sermons grew quieter, his eyes heavy. He stayed in the village until his death, but he never walked near the house again. That silence only made the fear stronger. The villagers wondered what he had seen, what he had heard. If a man of faith could not speak of it, what chance did ordinary people have? The final turn came when a boy, young, foolish, eager to test the edge of bravery, entered the house on a dare. His friends stood outside, laughing nervously, telling him not to linger. He grinned, holding a lantern high, and stepped inside. Minutes passed. His friends called his name, but the house gave nothing back. Not a sound, not a flicker of his lantern. They waited, calling louder until the night grew heavier. Then they ran. The search began at dawn. The boy's father pushed through the door with a group of men. The air inside was cold, stale, as if the house had not been opened in decades. Dust lay thick across the floor. At the bottom of the staircase, the father found the boy's shoes, neatly side by side, their laces still tied. There were no footprints leading up the steps, no marks in the dust. Nothing else of him remained. The villagers whispered that the house had taken him. Some said it inhaled too deeply that night. Others claimed it swallowed him whole. His parents never recovered, their grief turning them silent, their eyes hollow like the windows of the house itself. From then on, no one dared to enter. The crooked lane became a place of avoidance, a scar on the village map. Yet the fear only deepened, because if the house could take a child, if it could hide him so completely, what else could it do? And why, after all these years, did it keep breathing? The villagers did not write down their fears. They carried them in whispers, in half-finished sentences, in the way their eyes slid away from the crooked lane. But fragments of the story survived, scattered across years, retold by those who had seen too much. One old shepherd recalled standing outside the house on a night when the air was still. He swore he heard the sound of a person drawing breath inside, steady, calm, as if asleep. When asked if it could have been an animal, he shook his head. It was not the sound of a beast, he said. It was like standing beside a bed, listening to someone dream. His sheep bolted before he did, and he never passed that way again. The widow who fled barefoot told another strange detail. She said when she woke inside the house, her candle had gone out, though she had lit it before lying down. The flame, she claimed, did not fade gently but was blown out by a sudden gust, one that seemed to come from the floorboards themselves. The breath, she said, rose from below. Then there was the priest. He left little testimony, but in the weeks after his visit, some villagers noticed changes in him. He began carrying a handkerchief pressed to his mouth, even when he was not sick. He started leaving pauses in his prayers, as though struggling to breathe. He was asked once more what he had seen inside, and his only reply was, "It exhales, but I do not know where it goes." The boy's disappearance left the sharpest mark. Searchers described the dust inside the house as undisturbed, except for the shoes by the staircase. Some noticed faint streaks along the walls, like claw marks dragged downward. But the wood was not broken. It was warped, softened, as though the scratches had been made into flesh, not timber. Others swore they smelled something foul, a damp rot that lingered on their clothes after leaving. The father, broken with grief, whispered only once about the search. He said the silence inside was wrong. He said silence should be empty, but this one felt full. Over the years, outsiders tried to explain it. A scholar who visited the village suggested the house was built on swamp ground. He claimed gases rising from the soil might cause drafts that made the house seem to breathe. He called it natural, a trick of sound and air. Yet when he stayed one night near the crooked lane, he left before dawn, pale and shaken, refusing to discuss his findings. Another visitor, a man with equipment and tape recorders, declared he would capture the breathing once and for all. He placed microphones inside, left them overnight, and returned at sunrise. The tapes were filled with static, but buried in the hiss was a sound, faint but steady. Inhale, pause, exhale. He played it for the villagers. Some nodded in grim recognition. Others covered their ears and begged him to stop. But even the recordings conflicted. Some who listened said the breath was cold, like air sucked in through a cavern. Others swore it was warm, too close to human to be natural. And then there were those who insisted it was not air at all, but a voice so deep and steady it could only be heard when stretched into silence. Objects from the house fueled more suspicion. Candle stubs left behind were bent at strange angles, as though the wax had softened in heat, not made by fire. Windows warped inward, as if pressed from outside, though no marks remained on the walls. Every clue only deepened the uncertainty. Was it sound? Was it air? Was it something alive? Or was it all imagination feeding on fear? The villagers asked, but no answer satisfied them. The contradictions made it worse, for certainty can be dismissed. But confusion leaves the door open. So the crooked lane remained quiet by day, cursed by night. The house stood, untouched, yet filled with testimonies and artifacts that never aligned. The more people searched for truth, the less it seemed possible. Some whispered that was the trick, that the house breathed not only air, but doubt. That the more one questioned, the stronger it became, and still, the most haunting detail endured, repeated by every witness who lingered too long outside its walls. When the house exhaled, it was not the sound that terrified them. It was the waiting silence before the next inhale. Fear has a way of settling into the marrow, becoming part of a people until they can no longer remember what life was like without it. For the villagers, the house was no longer just a story told at night. It became something heavier, shaping the way they lived, breathed, and raised their children. After the boy vanished, grief turned the village into a place of silence. His parents stopped speaking, their days marked only by hollow movements, fetching water, tending to the fields, never looking toward the crooked lane. Their house grew cold, the hearth rarely lit. Neighbors said they sometimes heard the mother whispering through the night, calling softly for her son, as if he were just beyond the walls. But her words never carried an answer. The fear seeped into other homes. Children who once played freely no longer ran near the edge of the forest. Parents warned them that if they lingered too close to the crooked lane, the house would hear their breath and take it for its own. Bedtime stories shifted. Where once they had been about brave hunters and clever animals, they turned into warnings wrapped in shadows. "Do not go where the house can see you," mothers said, "or you will not return." Nightmares spread. Villagers of all ages spoke of dreams where they lay awake in their beds, yet felt another presence breathing beside them, steady, slow, patient. Some woke gasping, clutching at their throats as if the air had been pulled from them. Others woke with damp skin, convinced they had felt a warm exhale brush against their face. The dreams were never identical, but always carried the same weight, the sense of being watched by something too close, too intimate, too alive. A farmer's wife lost her sleep entirely. She woke each night certain that the air in her home was shifting with a rhythm that was not her own. Her husband dismissed it at first, but soon he too began to wake in panic. Their bodies grew weak, their faces drawn, until they abandoned their house altogether and moved to another village. They never returned. Even the animals carried the unease. Dogs barked at nothing, their eyes fixed toward the crooked lane. Horses refused to travel the road that passed near the house, their hooves digging into the ground, their bodies trembling as if they sensed something their owners could not. Livestock near the area grew thin, restless, refusing to graze. It was as if the air itself carried a sickness, invisible but felt. The villagers tried to explain it through faith. Prayers grew longer. Candles burned in windows until their stubs melted into nothing. But still the weight lingered. When the wind died at night and silence settled too heavily, people would hold their breath in unison, as though trying to keep themselves unseen, unheard, untouched. Some swore the house could feel them even from afar, that if they breathed too loudly in the dark, it would know. Paranoia followed. Quarrels rose in families, suspicions grew between neighbors. When someone fell ill with shortness of breath or a heavy chest, whispers began that they had walked too close to the crooked lane, that the house had caught their scent. No one admitted it openly, but there was a quiet belief that once the house noticed you, it did not forget. The weight of fear was not only in dreams, but in the waking hours. People avoided the lane, but they could not avoid the stories. They lived with them, generation after generation, until the house was no longer just a place. It was part of them, a scar in their collective memory, one that reopened each time a child asked, "Why is that house empty?" And an elder had to answer, "Because it is not ours." Grief never left the families who had lost loved ones. They lived hollow lives, their pain deepening the legend. Fear, grief, and silence fed one another until the whole village was bound together in quiet dread, and yet, despite their terror, no one tore the house down. They spoke of it, avoided it, cursed it, but they left it standing. Some said it was because they were afraid of what would be released if the walls collapsed. Others whispered that the house would not allow it, that its breath was the very thing holding the rotting wood in place. So the villagers lived on, haunted in their sleep, marked in their waking hours, bound to a house that was not theirs, but had claimed them all the same. They could not forget it. They could not ignore it. And deep down, they began to wonder something darker. If the house could make them live in fear without ever crossing its threshold, then perhaps it did not need to feed on bodies at all. Perhaps fear itself was enough. Theories and investigations, the house did not vanish from memory. It remained, its sagging roof and leaning walls casting a shadow longer than any building its size should. For the villagers, it was a silent torment. For outsiders, it became a curiosity. And in time, people came to study it. Officials arrived first, summoned after the boy's disappearance. They wrote reports that avoided words like haunted or alive. They described the house as dangerous, unsafe, its beams rotten, its floor unstable. They declared the boy had likely fallen through a weak floorboard, lost in a crawl space too dangerous to search. Yet when the father begged them to look deeper, they refused. Their notes ended with a simple warning: abandoned structure. No further action required, but the villagers knew better. They had entered the house that day. They had seen the floor unbroken, the dust undisturbed. They knew the officials had left because they were afraid, not because they were certain. Years later, a different kind of visitor came. Men with cameras, tape recorders, and heavy bags of equipment. They called themselves researchers of the unexplained, though the villagers called them reckless. They claimed they could measure the house, document its breadth. They set up microphones in every room, pointing their lenses at rotting beams and broken windows. The villagers did not wait with them. They stood at the edge of the lane, watching the men disappear through the door. All night the house stood still. But when morning came, the men returned pale, their voices tight. One of them carried a tape. He played it in the square. Static filled the air, sharp and hissing. Then beneath it, something steady. A rhythm faint but clear. Inhale, pause, exhale. It repeated over and over, too slow for human lungs, too even for chance. The villagers froze. The men smiled, triumphant, saying they had proof. But no one cheered. Some women covered their ears, others wept, and the oldest among them whispered, "You should not have taken its breath away." Theories spread like smoke. Some believed the house itself was alive. Its beams ribs, its walls skin, its foundation a spine driven into the earth. They said it had grown hungry after being abandoned, and every sigh was the sound of it waiting. Others argued it was a vessel, that the souls of those who died inside had filled its walls, and their endless inhaling and exhaling was all that remained of them. The house did not breathe to live, it breathed to remember. A few tried to explain it away. They spoke of swamp gas, of strange acoustics in old timber, of the human mind tricking itself in silence. They said fear was contagious, passed down like a disease, that the villagers were not cursed but convinced. And yet, when asked why the boy's shoes remained untouched at the staircase, none of them could answer. Paranormal groups returned in later years. Some claimed to see shadows moving across walls with no light to cast them. Others swore they heard whispers that did not belong to their team. One man staggered out, clutching his chest, convinced the house had tried to draw the air from his lungs. He never spoke publicly again. Conspiracy followed too. A few whispered that the house was never meant to be built at all. That its foundation had been laid on something older, something buried in the soil. An ancient grave, a shrine, or perhaps a wound in the earth itself. They said the house was not the source of the breathing, but only the mask. That whatever lay beneath the ground had been waiting long before the first stone was placed. The investigations gave the villagers no peace. If anything, they deepened the fear. Proof did not comfort them. Science did not explain it. Every theory, every recording, every scratch mark on the wall only added to the weight of what they already knew. The house did not belong in their world. It lingered on the edge of their lives like a wound that would never heal. And still it breathed. No matter the season, no matter the storm, it breathed. The villagers asked themselves the same question, again and again. If the house inhaled, what did it take in? And when it exhaled, where did it go? The house still stands. Its roof sags lower with each year, its beams twist deeper into rot, but it does not fall. Storms hammer it, winters freeze it, and still it waits. The villagers have learned to live with its presence, though they do not speak of it often. They pass the crooked lane quickly, eyes averted, hearts tight. They tell their children to keep away, and their children tell theirs. The warning has become part of the village itself, passed down like blood. By day, it is quiet. Only a ruin, only wood and stone. Some travelers see it and scoff, calling it nothing more than a forgotten shell. But the villagers know better. They know to wait for nightfall. When the air grows still, when even the insects fall silent, the house begins again. A deep inhale, a long exhale. Slow, patient, steady, as if lungs hidden within the walls pull life from the night. What is it breathing? That is the question no one can answer. Some say it feeds on the fear of the living. Others whisper it collects the souls of the dead. A few believe it is waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to step inside and stay. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part. Not that it breathes, but that it has never stopped. If the house inhales, then it draws something in. If it exhales, then something must leave. What if, one night, the air it releases is not empty? What if it exhales not silence, but something that has been waiting too long inside? The villagers whisper still. At night, the house breathes. And if you ever find yourself on that crooked lane, with the wind gone still and the silence pressing heavy on your chest, hold your breath. For if the house notices you, it may not let go,